Okay, so now we know how the search form works, and we've wired it up with the onChange attribute from React. Remember, it's a synthetic event. And essentially here we're saying, okay, let's get the target value from the event that we are typing in. So this would be the input field. And then we don't want to hard code the value to be a nothing value. So that's why we took it out from here. At this point, we get the data here. If I type it Star Wars, right, I can see the star written there, but I don't have no way like for my app to respond to it. Normally with jQuery or something, you could probably like write in a long function here and then manually update, each of these listings. But we don't want to do that. We want to work with what React has and how React is a framework and can help us out with changes basically to any kind of data. And you can think of data as almost the same thing as state, right? In software development, when you make an app or you make any kind of, product, there is an initial state or initial set of data that goes with it. And because for that reason, we don't want to put state or data inside a component, like movie listings. It would make more sense to put it at the top level from the app. So we can preload this data at the get-go and then send it over as a prop to our components that need it. So here we want to say, instead of props actually, I want to say movies, and I'm just going to pass in the movies here. And that will basically, I need to do one more thing. So I need to go back to my listings now, and I need to get that prop. And I need to say, all right, cool. I have a props called movies, and I'm going to use destructuring from props. Save that, and that will re-render my movies. So now what I've done here is essentially said, okay, rather than put data somewhere else within a component, I want to just preload my app with a certain set of data, this fake data here, and then make my components aware of it by passing it down through the power of props. This is a paradigm, a design pattern that you'll see quite often when you do React programming. So I'm just bringing it up to speed for future videos as well. You'll see this a lot. People load an app with state, and even if you work outside of React, if you work with other programming languages like Java or so, you'll also hear this word state thrown around because that is kind of how they do it in true engineering. So you don't want to, long story short, you don't want to put your data somewhere deep. You want to keep it at the top, and then also you want your app to be able to respond to changes in the way the data, the new data that comes up, or basically the way the data has changed. And so for us, we're going to want to modify our function from being a normal component function to more of a class, and a class that is like a component. And so what we're going to do is we're going to inherit from React using ES6 syntax the component class. And we're going to extend our own app as a class from component. So if you're not familiar with this ES6 syntax, I do recommend you check out the JavaScript LA Guide to ES6 playlist that I made, and that will clear up a lot of the class confusion. But here, essentially, we've turned our function from just being a regular JavaScript function that returns a component, a simple dumb component, to more of a advanced component, a class component. And because we're inheriting from the component method, we want to use the render method that's built in, and then pass in our return statement here. And so if we save this, our app still works just fine. You'll notice I didn't have to change anything down here, the export default app. By having this render method, app pulls in the render method and renders basically this app that we have here. But now that it is a class, I can do more things. So I'm going to go ahead and use some basic boilerplate code that you'll see a lot. And this is just inheriting the props, any props that come from React. We want to extend, and we want to call the super method, which is the component method, on those props. And then here's where I actually want us to pay attention. So I want to have a state variable, And I want that state variable to be preloaded with movies. So we're going to create our own state object, and inside it's going to have a property called movies, and we're going to preload that data with movies from here, the local, fake data. And then down here, instead of using the local fake data directly, we're going to change that to be this.state.movies. So it's a little bit of a design pattern, a little bit of an exercise. You notice that the app is still working just fine, and I'm still able to get my stuff. But now at least we have, a way to work with the data in a more organized fashion. All right, so we got the movies loaded in and everything looks just fine. So now what we want to do is, now that our app is basically ready to go with state, we also want a way to handle any kind of changes. Right now what we're doing is we're going to the search form, and directly every time we change the form here, it's being handled by the search form. We want to actually pass this value up to the app so the state can do something with the changes made. So in order for us to do that, we need to make a few changes. First, we need to pass in a prop for search form, and so we'll call it handle term. And right now we don't have anything to pass, so what we'll need to do is we'll need to create another function, and this is a function that's going to exist on the class called handle term. And just like the search form, it's going to also get an event. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to take the code from the search form and pass it up here. So technically what we want to do is console log everything and check that we still get the same term. So e.target.value here. And then we want to pass the function here. So we want to pass it down to our search form as a prop and make it available here. And the reason you do it this way is this is the way that React works. This is the React paradigm. Whenever you have data to send up, you'll use a function. And whenever you have data to send down, you use a prop. So props handle data between up and down. So data comes from the app as state to a prop, and that's called read. And we read data from the central place of state, central app state, using a prop. For the regular component that we have here, like the dumb components that are just functions. And then if we want to send data back up to the app where the central state is, we would use a function. And so that is exactly the paradigm we're following here. We're saying, okay, I'm going to get my props and I'm going to get my event handler from my app.js, and I'm going to basically just take a look at one more time here and see, what do we call it? It's called handle term. So handle term, I'm going to pull that off the props here. I want to actually replace this with, instead of console log, I want to just pass it to handle term. This is the way we would do it in React. So now what's going to happen is on change, we're going to take the function that we passed from here and we're going to send up the data. And so now if we take a look at our app, it should still work the same way. We've got the Star Wars coming in, and so cool. We have now moved the changing of the state here to back in the control of the app, and so this makes it a little bit easier for us to work with the state. So in the next video, what we want to do is we want to use fetch to help us basically make real requests to the Open Movie database, and then use that instead of fake data to populate our movies as well as load in movies. So I'll see you in the next video.